Hey, it's Jake Newton with the Center. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some different things that you can look at when building out a travel risk management program. Maybe you already have a travel risk management program. This can be a little bit of a benchmark for you to identify if you have everything that you need. Now, I'm going to focus largely on the overall system, but more so at the beginning of this process. What does it look like to build this program and make sure that we're squared away for sending travelers all over the world, domestically, and what have you. Ultimately, we want to maximize our ability to do safe and secure business travel and largely take care of those that are within this process. So let's get started. If you look at travel holistically, I'm going to walk you through this process that we use at the center. It's preparation, which is where I'm going to focus most of my time. And there's a few others that I'll discuss in other videos that get into planning, execution, and adaptation. If you're familiar with the international standard, ISO 31030, that is a great resource to do this whole project. It's the prevailing standard for building a travel risk management program. This is a little bit of a different vernacular, but benchmarks to that, as well as some other industry prevailing best practices and standards from our background from the center with the Department of Defense, also some things that are published by the United States State Department. It kind of brings all of these things together. So we go by preparation, planning, execution, adaptation. So let's get into some of these different things. Preparation. What is preparation? This has everything to do with those activities to make sure you as an organization are prepared for travel from a risk management perspective. How are we going to take care of our travelers for those risks that people will experience when they're traveling around the globe? How do we make sure we're managing those things, whether we're buying the risk, buying down the risk, whether we're avoiding it or managing it by some other means. But this has everything to do with building the program to address some of these different issues that our travelers might be up against. So let's get into this a little bit deeper. So number one, plans, policies, procedures. Of course, your travel risk management policy, you want to have a travel policy, a travel risk management policy to be more precise. Many of you probably have an expense policy, expense management policy that has all of the different expense considerations in there. We also want one that focuses on that requirement for travelers from a risk management standpoint. People that are working remotely, people that are doing long-term stays in other locations, people that are traveling for short-term trips. We want to have a policy that looks at these different considerations from a risk management perspective. Leisure, we want to address. We want to address how we're going to perform travel risk assessments. We want to have that risk profile accomplished. There's several things we want in that policy, but a policy nonetheless. But then there's also the plans and procedures. And this is what are procedures for travelers, whether it's booking procedures or whether it's requirements for approvals to go to a high-risk environment. All of these different things we need to have those procedures set for. But then there's also the other side of this where we have the support mechanisms looking after the travelers. What are their procedures in this process? We want to have all of this laid out because at the end of the day, this is a huge program. And so we want to have all of that documented and clear or facilitated by software. But what we don't want are these things in somebody's brain. And then if they leave the organization, all of that institutional knowledge goes with them. So we build these things out. This is where ISO 31030 can be a great resource for that. Then we get into education and training. Education and training for whom? Well, that's where we get into these three different layers. So each of these different things apply to organizational leadership, the traveler themselves, as well as support personnel. And one of the big pieces here is the actual traveler. So often one of the things that we see at the center is organizations will build in these different support capabilities and they kind of forget about the traveler. When we're building out this program, think about the traveler. What are they up against? Even if the traveler is leadership, what are the things they're going to experience? And then how do we take these support frameworks to support them in their trip? It's not one or the other, it's both and. But we need to emphasize the traveler. So for the traveler specifically, that has to do with education and training. We want them to have a fundamental understanding. Every traveler, we want to have a fundamental understanding of what they're up against, the risks they might face, how that applies to the organization, reporting procedures, what they're supposed to do during emergencies. There's a whole series of things that the prevailing standards and best practices outline that we want to make sure our travelers understand. This is critical. So often organizations actually do not implement traveler training. So we want to make sure that they get all this information as they come into the organization and as they're getting ready to go through their trips on behalf of it. For those going to high-risk locations, we want to increase the emphasis those individuals receive. We want to give them some sort of emphasis for the specific location, or maybe they are an individual that is traveling with special information. Maybe it's intellectual property. Well, then we want to give some additional tools beyond that awareness level training so that they can have greater understanding of how to protect the organization and themselves. Equipment and technology. This has everything to do with the things that your travelers require to have with them, as well as those technologies that, and this is a big term, but those things that help us support the program as well. So this isn't the complicated thing, but travel management software, travel risk management software. What I mean by that is the ability to monitor locations, the ability to track your travelers, the communications technologies that you use. Maybe you're a business where you send people out into remote locations. Can they travel with a satellite phone? Can't they? Some places that's not cool, but understanding all of the technologies that we need to help us facilitate the travel, we want to have that outlined and as part of our policies and procedures. And then how this relates to these folks down here, are they prepared to use those things? Do they know how to operate the things that facilitate their travel process? But then we get into the individual. So each of these things applies to each of these different layers. So organizational leadership, not only are they the leaders of the organization, maybe some of these leaders are on the crisis management team. If something were to happen to travelers, we want to have that understanding. On the other side of the spectrum, we want leadership to be prepared if they are the travelers. So that kind of gets into the executive protection side of things. How does our travel risk management program relate to our executive protection program? That needs some pretty good clarity. A lot of these different things, if you kind of think about it at a macro level, is increasingly becoming the safety and security of the individual regardless of where they're working. So if you kind of look at things from that lens, that can kind of help facilitate these processes. So you have leadership, you have the travelers. Again, travelers, you prepare based upon the risk. And then one thing I haven't touched on a lot yet is the support personnel. So the support people, whether we have them internally, maybe this is our travel assistance provider, maybe this is our insurance provider, maybe this is our travel management company. But for how we're accomplishing travel, are all of these individuals having a unified understanding of what we're trying to accomplish within the organization? Do we periodically check in on these things so that these individuals understand how all of this is occurring? The other part of this too is maybe you have an internal security operations center, or maybe you have people dedicated to this program. Whoever that multidisciplinary team is that is dedicated to supporting travelers, we want to make sure that in-house they have a quality understanding of how we're looking after our travelers as well. It's not an uncommon thing where support personnel, whether at corporate or at a different location for a vendor, whatever it might be, these individuals are disconnected. They don't have good communication, they don't work together, they don't have the same understanding. So we build this in and we get that first prioritized establishment for preparation. This is what we call preparation, but getting this whole piece of the program squared away so that the rest of the program can be accomplished effectively. So what does that look like? Well, from a planning perspective, this has everything to do with preparing for trips on a holistic basis, on an annual basis. This also has to do with planning for trips on an individual basis, particularly those, particularly those that have increased risk. Are we planning as an organization? Are we planning as an individual? Are we planning as a government within the government? Because we know traveling overseas or traveling to different locations can have geopolitical consequences. So we need to recognize these things and then prepare for the risk of the location we're going, prepare for the risk of the traveler, and prepare for the risk that the organization might pose for these different things. So we go through a planning process for trips. Then when things happen, we need to execute upon that. We go through a process to make sure we can recover travelers, make sure they're okay, get them back on their journey or get them back home. And then based upon these lessons learned, we want to bring that information back into the process so that we can mitigate the risk. It's a system. Travel risk management is a system, largely beginning with this program on the front side. This isn't all of it by any means. We could delve into this for a long time, but this is the initial core infrastructure that we want to set up with the common understanding as it relates to these different roles: leadership, the traveler, and those supporting those travelers. So that's all for now. We'll get into some of these other capabilities with other videos. Thanks for watching. If you have questions, put them in the comments or reach out to us. Otherwise, until next time, cheers.